Language Matters. This is actually the name of a PBS documentary, but I like the name because it really emphasizes not just that we're going to be talking about language, but that language really does matter. Now, it matters to all of us at a personal level, because no matter what we do, we're talking, and how we present ourselves is through language. How we dress, how we carry ourselves, maybe not our hair, tells the world something about who we are, or who we want to be. In the same way, language tells us a lot about who we are as well. It tells us every time that we interact with people, we are actually conveying not just some informational meaning. It's not just a communicative tool, but we're conveying or indeed constructing our social identities with every word that we take. Now, I'm a linguist, so from a professional point of view, language matters to me in additional ways. So, for example, unlike any other species in the world, human babies learn language of incredible complexity just through exposure to natural language. Now, this is one of the miracles of language and of the human mind, that understanding language, and this is all through just oral input, gives us a special linguistic knowledge. And this linguistic knowledge gives us a unique window into the human mind and lets us try to explore more fully its limits and capabilities as it applies to language. Now, in order to fully understand language, we really need to know about different kinds of languages, in fact, all kinds of languages. So understanding how languages vary, the ways in which they can vary, the ways in which they don't vary, this is all really important to understanding linguistic diversity. But just in the same way as it's important to understand how very different languages vary, we also need to understand how the tiny details, how a single language may have different varieties spoken. This tells us especially about how languages can change, the ways in which a single variety can change and evolve into different varieties. So these two types of linguistic diversity are really important to linguistic research and helping us understand all the intricacies of human language. Now, unfortunately, a lot of our languages, and thus linguistic diversity, is being lost. When we think about language endangerment or language loss, we think about extreme cases. We may think about Indigenous peoples in faraway lands, perhaps some of the Australian Aboriginal communities or the Native American communities, many of whom have, through various former government policies and practices, have lost or severely endangered linguistic varieties. Now, this is particularly sad because, in fact, many of these languages are undocumented, and so there's no way to get that language back. In fact, linguists actually estimate that we lose one of our 7,000 languages about every 2 weeks. And at this rate, we're going to be out of languages pretty soon, except for the handful that most of the world speak. Now, at the University of Hong Kong, we're actually very interested in documenting endangered languages. But I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about language loss in our own backyard here in Hong Kong. It's a sort of language loss that can sometimes go under the radar because there's not exactly different languages, but rather different varieties of the same language. And for this reason, people sometimes don't think about it as a whole language being lost. We still have Cantonese, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about language in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, as we can all appreciate here, is a fabulous, vibrant, international city. It's known for its dizzying vertical heights, its gritty streets, its suave countryside, dim sum, kung fu, haute couture. Our fragrant harbour has it all. And of course, Hong Kong is also very much a Chinese city. Of the 7 million people here in Hong Kong, 6.5 million are Chinese, and of those, 6 million are Cantonese. Since Hong Kong's return to China, Mandarin, the use of spoken Mandarin is definitely on the increase. And we also have, of course, English is an official language here as well. This is spoken widely in the territory. This is all very much in line with Hong Kong's policy of biliteracy and trilingualism. We're encouraging fluency in both written Chinese and English, and mastery of spoken Cantonese, Mandarin, and English. But what we don't see are the other languages. There's actually a significant number of speakers of other languages in Hong Kong, including about 300,000 speakers of other Chinese varieties. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of these today. So the Waitao, or walled village communities, are actually one of Hong Kong's indigenous communities. They've been spoken in and around the New Territories for over a millennium. Yes, wow, that's what I thought. So this is one of the communities that I've been working with, and I was actually shocked to discover that it's actually really only the grandparent and great-grandparent generations that are still, even only occasionally, speaking this language. Now, obviously then it's not being transmitted to the new generations. And according to UNESCO, this puts it at a critically endangered status. Now, the children, of course, were actively discouraged from speaking Waitawa in schools, where Cantonese is an official medium of instruction. But, and obviously too, fluency in Cantonese here in Hong Kong will greatly contribute to socio-economic advancement. However, there's been little effort to actually maintain the heritage language alongside that, which is, in my mind, as a linguist, is a great shame, but it's also a shame for other reasons. There seems to be a great myth, or a very widespread myth, that you can clog your brain with unnecessary knowledge, but when it comes to language, this couldn't be further from the truth. Multilingualism has actually been shown to actually present certain significant cognitive advantages. Now, unfortunately, this research obviously has not been widely disseminated to the relevant communities, and we see language loss happening all the time. But unfortunately for the Waitao community, and the Solo community, as we'll soon find out, this is too bad, because Waitawa has actually been deemed by UNESCO as one of Hong Kong's intangible cultural heritages, and it's all but gone now. So this creates an urgent need to document the variety, and also well, at least in these efforts, I hope that our energy and effort will help to contribute to a growing awareness of the situation, and in so doing, go some way towards some revitalization efforts for the communities. Now, another community that we see here facing similar challenges is actually just across the harbour here, the Soilo community, sometimes formerly known as the Danga community, or the fisher folk. They're traditionally boat dwellers. They lived on and around the boats. They were fishermen until, for various economic reasons, were forced onshore, where they were given access to public housing and schooling. And like the Waitao children, they were actually discouraged from speaking Solowa in the schools. So that, coupled with, and not just discouraged actually, they were sort of chastised and corrected. It wasn't allowed. They had to speak Cantonese. And living alongside a lot of local Cantonese speakers, daily interactions, transactions, intermarriages, has basically given way to Cantonese as the dominant variety. Now, for a lot of members of these communities, they have actually redefined certain key elements of their culture, exclusive of language. So they haven't lost their identity, they've lost the linguistic part of their identity, but when you actually talk with the older generations, and you hear them together talking in Soilowa or about Soilowa, you really do sense a real bond between them. And that's something that's not going to be present with the newer generations. In fact, when asking one of our consultants about the difference between Cantonese and Soilowa, he told us that the word for foot and I have to, great apologies for my renditions of these. The word for foot in Cantonese is ge, but in Soilowa it's pronounced go, which sounds a little bit like horns. So people would say, oh, you people have horns. So people may find varieties like Waitawa or Soilowa quaint. Some may find them inferior. But whatever your judgment, the simple fact is they're equally valid linguistic systems in their own right. And ideally, they should be embraced and not replaced. Now, as we think of language as a tool for communication, we don't often think about language as having an ecology. But the dynamics of interaction of different languages in social contexts is an important aspect of understanding how language works. As we've seen in the two examples of Waitawa and Sodawa, we have actually seen dominant languages changing and replacing the local varieties. And this is unfortunately often the case, and it happens in a blink of an eye. So this is something that we really need to be aware of, how vulnerable language is. How vulnerable language is, basically, in its given environment. That just like other complex systems, it's subject to environmental pressures that will force change on language. Now in 2008 we had an Endangered Languages Week to try to encourage an awareness of these issues around the world. One of the events hosted by SOAS in London talked about the language footprint, just as you might talk about a carbon footprint. Essentially how it works is that if your language choice forces somebody else to change their language, then you're creating a language footprint. So there are ways to offset your language footprints. You can learn the local varieties. You can hire a local translator. But I think today the important thing is to understand that there is such a thing as a language footprint, that we are part of this environment that is changing the way we speak and our linguistic landscape. So I guess one of the really important things is that we really need to respect and encourage linguistic diversity, or we're really on the verge of losing not just linguistic diversity, cultural diversity, a wealth of traditional knowledge, and a sense of our place in the world. So, as you take your next steps around Hong Kong, think about the footprints that you're creating, and think about how you can contribute to this situation that we have, and remembering that language matters. Thank you.